Byzantium's wealth made it a target. In 513 BC, the Persian king Darius the Great crossed the Bosphorus on a bridge of boats during his campaign against the Scythians. Byzantium fell under Persian control for decades. When the Greeks defeated Persia, Byzantium joined the Delian League under Athenian leadership, but the city was caught between rival powers. During the Peloponnesian War, it switched allegiances between Athens and Sparta, depending on which fleet controlled the strait. In 340 BC, Philip II of Macedon, father of Alexander the Great, laid siege to Byzantium. According to legend, the city was saved when a bright light in the night sky revealed the Macedonian troops attempting a sneak attack. The citizens credited the moon goddess Artemis and adopted the crescent moon as their symbol. Byzantium maintained its independence through clever diplomacy for generations. But when Rome rose to dominate the Mediterranean, the city could not escape its reach. In 196 AD, the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus besieged Byzantium after the city backed his rival in a civil war. The siege lasted 3 brutal years. When the walls finally fell, Severus razed the city to the ground. But even Severus recognized the location's immense strategic value. He rebuilt Byzantium grander than before, adding a hippodrome, new walls, and colonnaded streets. The city was reborn as a Roman provincial town, waiting for its greatest transformation. In 324 AD, Emperor Constantine defeated his last rival and became the sole ruler of the Roman Empire. He faced a critical decision: where to govern his vast domain. Rome was fading. It was too far from the empire's eastern frontiers, where the real threats lay. Constantine needed a new capital, and he chose the old city of Byzantium. The emperor personally walked the boundaries of his new city, marking out walls that would enclose an area 5 times larger than the old town. When his engineers protested the enormous scale, Constantine reportedly said he would keep walking until the invisible guide before him stopped. Construction began on an unprecedented scale. Tens of thousands of workers labored for 6 years. Constantine stripped treasures from cities across the empire to decorate his capital. Statues, columns, and obelisks arrived from Egypt, Greece, and Rome itself. A massive imperial palace rose on the eastern tip of the peninsula. A grand forum, the Augustaion, became the civic heart. The Maese, a wide colonnaded avenue, cut through the city like a spine. Constantine built a new hippodrome that could seat 80,000 spectators. On May 11th, 330 AD, the city was formally dedicated in an elaborate ceremony. Constantinople, the city of Constantine, was officially born. The emperor declared it Nova Roma, the new Rome. He offered free grain to citizens who would relocate there. Senators, merchants, and artisans flooded in. Within a generation, Constantinople had grown from a provincial town into one of the largest cities in the world. As Constantinople grew, so did the threats against it. Goths, Huns, and Vandals pressed against the empire's borders. In 408 AD, Emperor Theodosius II ordered the construction of a new set of walls to protect the expanding city. These were not ordinary fortifications. The Theodosian walls stretched over 6 kilometers across the peninsula, from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn. They consisted of 3 defensive layers: a deep moat, an outer wall, and a towering inner wall 12 meters high and 5 meters thick, reinforced by 96 massive towers. No army on Earth had ever faced anything like them. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Rome itself fell to the Visigoths under Alaric. The Eternal City was sacked for the first time in 800 years. The shock reverberated across the known world, but Constantinople stood firm behind its walls. In 441 and again in 447, Attila the Hun brought his devastating cavalry to the gates of Constantinople. An earthquake had damaged sections of the Theodosian walls just before his arrival. In a remarkable feat, the citizens repaired the walls in just 60 days, even rebuilding the moat. Attila, unable to breach the defenses, accepted tribute and turned away. In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire officially ceased to exist. The last Western emperor was deposed by a Germanic chieftain. But in the east, Constantinople endured. The Roman Empire did not fall. It continued, centered on this extraordinary city. Constantinople became the sole guardian of Roman law, Greek learning, and Christian faith. Its libraries preserved texts that would otherwise have been lost forever. Its walls had saved not just a city, but an entire civilization. In 527 AD, Justinian IV ascended to the throne. He was the son of a peasant, raised by his uncle Emperor Justin, and he carried an extraordinary ambition to restore the Roman Empire to its former greatness. Alongside him stood Empress Theodora, a former actress from the streets of Constantinople who became one of the most powerful women in history. In January 532, Constantinople erupted in the Nika riots. Rival chariot racing factions, the Blues and Greens, united against Justinian's heavy taxation. Rioters burned large sections of the city, including the original Hagia Sophia Church. They even crowned a rival emperor. Justinian considered fleeing, but Theodora reportedly told him that imperial purple made a fine burial shroud. She refused to run. Emboldened, Justinian sent his general Belisarius into the Hippodrome, where the rebels had gathered. In the massacre that followed, an estimated 30,000 people were killed. The rebellion was crushed. From the ashes, Justinian rebuilt Constantinople on a scale that staggered the imagination. His crowning achievement was the new Hagia Sophia. He hired the brilliant mathematicians, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus, rather than traditional architects. In just 5 years, they created a building unlike anything the world had seen. Its massive dome, 31 meters across, appeared to float above the nave, supported by hidden pendentives. When Justinian entered the completed building on December 27th, 537, he reportedly whispered, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." The Hagia Sophia became the largest cathedral on earth and would hold that title for nearly 1,000 years. Under Justinian, Constantinople reached perhaps 300,000 inhabitants. It was the wealthiest, most cultured, and most fortified city in the world. This was Constantinople at its early zenith, a city that had risen from a small Greek colony to become the undisputed queen of cities. After the glory of Justinian, the empire entered centuries of existential crisis. In 541, the plague of Justinian swept through Constantinople, killing hundreds of thousands and crippling the economy. The city that had sparkled with new churches and rebuilt monuments became a haunted shell of itself. War with Sassanid Persia dragged on for decades, exhausting the treasury and the legions alike. Emperor Heraclius mounted a desperate counter-campaign in the 620s, recovering the true cross from Persian hands, but his triumph was short-lived. From the Arabian Peninsula, a new faith was rising. Islam united the tribes, and within a generation, Muslim armies had swallowed Persia entirely and stripped Byzantium of Egypt, Syria, and the Holy Land. Constantinople itself came under direct threat. Between 674 and 678, an Arab fleet besieged the city for 4 years. The Byzantines unleashed their terrifying secret weapon, Greek fire, a liquid flame that burned even on water, consuming the Arab ships. The siege was broken, but in 717, the Arabs returned with an even larger force, over 100,000 soldiers and a massive fleet. Emperor Leo III held firm behind the Theodosian walls, and once again, Greek fire turned the sea into an inferno. The siege collapsed after a brutal winter and Bulgarian attacks on the Arab rear. Constantinople had survived, but the empire that surrounded it was forever diminished. The great provinces were gone. The city now stood as the heart of a smaller, harder, more desperate state. Surviving the Arab sieges came at a spiritual cost. In 726, Emperor Leo III ignited a firestorm by ordering the destruction of religious icons across the empire. He believed God was punishing Byzantium for idolatry. Soldiers smashed mosaic portraits of Christ and the saints. Monks who resisted were imprisoned, tortured, or killed. The iconoclast controversy tore Constantinople apart for over a century. Families were divided, monasteries were raided, the very identity of the Byzantine faith hung in the balance. Finally, in 843, Empress Theodora restored icon veneration in what the Orthodox Church still celebrates as the triumph of orthodoxy. But a deeper fracture was forming between Constantinople and Rome. Theological disputes, political rivalries and cultural pride widened the gap between Eastern and Western Christianity. In 1054, papal legates stormed into the Hagia Sophia and placed a bull of excommunication on the altar. The Patriarch of Constantinople responded in kind. The Great Schism was complete. Christendom was permanently split. This division would have catastrophic consequences. In 1202, the Fourth Crusade set out from Venice to reclaim the Holy Land. But debts, greed, and Venetian manipulation redirected the Crusaders toward Constantinople itself. In April 1204, Western Christian soldiers breached the walls that had held against Persians, Arabs, and Bulgars. What followed was 3 days of unspeakable violence. Crusaders looted churches, smashed relics, melted down sacred gold, and assaulted civilians. The Great Library was destroyed. Priceless treasures were shipped to Venice. The Queen of Cities was left a burned, hollow ruin. A Latin emperor sat on the Byzantine throne, and the true heirs of Rome fled into exile. In 1261, the exiled Byzantines under Michael VIII Palaiologos recaptured Constantinople from the Latins. But the city they returned to was a ghost of its former self. Population decimated, palaces crumbling, trade routes in Venetian and Genoese hands. The restored empire was a small state surrounded by enemies. And from the hills of northwestern Anatolia, a new power was rising. The Ottoman Turks, originally a minor frontier emirate, grew with astonishing speed. By the late 1300s, they had conquered most of the Balkans and surrounded Constantinople on all sides. The city became an island in an Ottoman sea. In 1452, a young and brilliant sultan named Mehmed II decided to finish what generations had attempted. He was just 21 years old, consumed by a single obsession, taking Constantinople. Mehmed built the fortress of Rumeli Hisara on the European shore of the Bosphorus, choking off naval access. He commissioned the largest cannon the world had ever seen, a 27-foot bronze monster capable of hurling half-ton stone balls. On April 6, 1453, the Ottoman army of perhaps 80,000 men encamped before the Theodosian walls. Inside, Emperor Constantine V commanded fewer than 7,000 defenders. The siege lasted 53 days. Ottoman cannons pounded the walls relentlessly. Byzantine defenders patched breaches with rubble and timber through the night. The chain across the Golden Horn held the Ottoman fleet at bay, until Mehmed ordered his ships dragged overland on greased logs, bypassing the barrier entirely. On May 29th, in the gray light before dawn, Mehmed launched the final assault. Wave after wave crashed against the walls. Emperor Constantine V drew his sword, stripped off his imperial regalia, and charged into the breach. He was never seen again. By morning, Ottoman soldiers flooded through the broken gates. The last remnant of the Roman Empire, which had endured for over 1,000 years after Rome itself had fallen, was extinguished forever. Sultan Mehmed II rode into the conquered city on a white horse. He went straight to the Hagia Sophia, marveled at its dome, and ordered it converted into a mosque. But Mehmed was no mere destroyer. He was a builder. He declared Constantinople his new capital and set about transforming it. He invited people of all faiths to return and repopulate the city. Greeks, Armenians, Jews expelled from Spain, all were welcomed. Mehmed built a magnificent Topkapi palace on the promontory overlooking the Bosphorus and the Golden Horn, a sprawling complex of courtyards, gardens, and treasury rooms that would serve as the seat of Ottoman power for nearly 4 centuries. He constructed the Grand Bazaar, which grew into one of the largest covered markets on earth, a labyrinth of over 4,000 shops selling silk, spices, jewels, and carpets. The city began to be called Istanbul, likely derived from the Greek phrase eis tin Polin, meaning to the city. Under Mehmed's successors, Istanbul flourished. The empire expanded across 3 continents, but it was under Suleiman the Magnificent, who reigned from 1520 to 1566, that Istanbul reached its Ottoman zenith. Suleiman's chief architect, the genius Mimar Sinan, reshaped the skyline with masterpieces of Islamic architecture. The Suleymaniye Mosque, completed in 1557, rivaled the Hagia Sophia in grandeur. Its cascading domes and slender minarets became the defining silhouette of Ottoman Istanbul. Sinan built over 300 structures across the empire, but his Istanbul works were his crown jewels. The city thrived as a crossroads of trade, culture, and diplomacy. Ottoman miniature painting flourished. Poetry and calligraphy reached extraordinary heights. Istanbul was the capital of one of the most powerful empires on earth, a city where East truly met West. By the 18th century, the Ottoman Empire was falling behind Europe in technology, military power, and governance. Istanbul remained magnificent, but the empire it governed was fraying at the edges. The once unstoppable Ottoman army suffered humiliating defeats against Russia and Austria. Reformist sultans tried to modernize, building European-style palaces like Dolmabahce on the Bosphorus shore, reforming the military, introducing a constitution. But it was too little, too late. In 1914, the Ottoman Empire entered World War I on the side of Germany. The decision was catastrophic. Gallipoli in 1915 became a legendary battle. Ottoman forces, led by a young commander named Mustafa Kemal, turned back a massive Allied invasion. But ultimately, the empire lost the war. In 1918, Allied warships sailed into the Bosphorus and occupied Istanbul. It was the final humiliation. For the first time in its history, the city was under foreign military control. But from the ashes rose Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. He led a revolutionary war of independence from Ankara, driving out foreign occupiers and abolishing the Sultanate in 1922. In 1923, he proclaimed the Republic of Turkey and made a shocking decision. Istanbul, the capital of empires for 16 centuries, would no longer be the capital. That honor went to Ankara. Istanbul was devastated by the choice, but endured, as it always had. Throughout the 20th century, the city reinvented itself, growing from 1 million to 15 million people, sprawling across both sides of the Bosphorus, a modern megacity straddling Europe and Asia. Today, Istanbul is the only city on Earth that sits on 2 continents. The Hagia Sophia still stands, witness to Roman emperors, Orthodox patriarchs, Ottoman sultans, and modern tourists alike. The call to prayer echoes across the same Golden Horn, where Greek colonists first landed nearly 3,000 years ago. Empires rise and fall, walls crumble, thrones are overturned. But Istanbul endures, the eternal city at the crossroads of the world.